Okay, in this video, let's talk about how you would prepare a document to be sent to a printer for commercial printing. So we'll go back to the example size that was in our previous video, like maybe let's just say we had to multi-produce this image for a postcard or something of that nature, and the exact size happened to come out to the weird dimensions that we were working on before, which were 744 by 941 inches. Really doesn't matter what size, but we got to pick some size. So since we were using this, let's continue on with it. So the big difference here is that you would create just a single document, just one artboard, even though the printer is probably going to print multiples of these at the same time, but we let them handle that part of it. We are then going to make our artboard the exact size, the exact cut size of the document, which in this case was the 744 by the 941, again in inches. And then the big difference here is that we put a bleed on here. Generally, commercial printing is 1/8 of an inch on each side, which is 1/4 of an inch extra all the way around. Commercial printing is normally CMYK. That's a 4-color printing process: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. We'll go ahead and we'll click OK. And if I click on the artboard tool, get my sizes here, you can see that that artboard itself is the exact size that we punched in. But we have, I'm going to click over here on the selection tool to get out of that mode, we have this red box, and that represents the bleed. So anything that needs to go right to the edge of this document needs to go all the way out here. So if we were designing the postcard from scratch and we needed say a black bar that went all the way across the postcard, then that would mean that in the end we want it to look like this with that black bar going across there. But legally we have to give the printer 1/8 of an inch of wiggle room. In other words, when they cut this thing, they could be off by a little bit. So we would never want to print it like this, because they're going to be printing this on a humongous sheet of paper, usually like a 30-inch by 40-inch piece of paper, and they're going to put as many of them as they can possibly get on there, whether it's front and back sided or not. If it's front and back, of course, they have to worry about getting everything registered just perfectly. But in our case, they could be off by a little bit, and if that little bit of white shows up from the paper, that's our fault, not theirs. So we have to give them that 1/8 of an inch. So again, what that translates to is anything that goes to the edge actually has to go 1/8 of an inch further. So how would that look for the image that we were just working on? I went ahead and deleted the crop marks from this one, and I'm going to do an edit and a copy. I'm going to go into the document that I was setting up for the printer, and I'm going to paste that in there. And key thing is that this box here represents the perfect area, but out to the red represents the area, the wiggle room that the printer has. And then when they print these on their humongous sheet of paper that many of these show up on, they would have crop marks which would relate to this inner box, in our case the artboard, and I'll click on the artboard tool just to make that more obvious. So where you see those little white dashed lines, that's where they're going to aim to cut. And in fact, you can see when you click on artboard, it brings up what looks like crop marks, so you can see exactly a preview of what the printer's going to see. They're going to print a whole bunch of these, as many as they can fit on one sheet, and then they're going to crop right across there, but they may be a little bit off. So it's really just that simple. Now I'm going to show you what I mentioned earlier, which was a little viewfinder that you can use. So let's go back to a document that has these oversized images. And let's use the same size again that we, in the end, need to print to. But a lot of times it's nice to be able to have something like physically, in the physical world, we'd cut out a piece of cardboard that would have a viewfinder of the exact size that we're going to print on, and then we'd move it around on here and see where the best area to crop it would be. In the digital realm, what we would do to accomplish that, and we might want to go ahead and just be extra cautious here, lock all of our layers, create a new layer for this viewfinder. And so to start this off, what we'll do is I'm going to create two boxes that do not have a stroke on them. So I'll bring the stroke forward, bring the fill forward, and I'm just going to pick some random different colors for now. But first thing I'm going to do is create a rectangle that has a width of the 744 and a height of the 941. So in other words, the exact size that I'm going for. Then I'm going to create a rectangle that's, sometimes you might want to measure this and come up with an exact measurement, but in my case I just want it to be plenty big so that it would cover up everything that's around that might interfere with my view. So I'll make that one that big, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give this one a different fill color than the other one, just so you can see what's happening here. So we put a different color in that one, and then what I'm going to do is use this to punch out a hole from here that becomes my little viewfinder. Now to do that, I use a tool called the Pathfinder, and I pick an option on the Pathfinder that is called -front. But before I can do that, it actually really needs to be the front piece, and you can see that it's not because it goes behind here. So easiest way to fix that is to right click on that, go to Arrange, and select Bring to Front. Now the green is on top, and if we wanted to make this perfectly aligned, we could use the alignment tools by selecting both of them and horizontal align and vertical align center. Really not quite necessary, but it makes it look a little prettier. Then we select both of them once again, go up to Window, select Pathfinder, and use this option right here, which is -front. Now the front is gone. Probably makes sense for this piece to be black or a dark gray or something like that. So I'll just select it, go over to my swatches, which are very limited here because I cleared them out at one point in this project. So I'll just use this little drop down and go to Open Swatch Library, go to Default Swatches, and then just put in the print-based swatches and load this guy up inside of here. And just select a dark gray here. And then the idea is now I can move this around in front of my artwork and see what's the best view of him I could get at the actual size that he's at right now. And you know what, let me just change slightly different color for this just so it shows up against the background here. But as long as I hold down the Shift key when I resize this, rather than resizing him, I can just resize this box and still know what I would see. And in fact, what I might want to do if I'm a very organized person is make a second copy of this by option dragging, and I could then take some type, click on the text tool, and I could put the size. So I have the size of this one written on here, and then let me just make a copy of that. And what I'll do is I'll change this, instead of inches to ratio, get rid of that, put a /, and then I'll take this guy, object group, this selection, object, group. So this one I know to leave alone because it says inches, but this one just says ratio. So if I go over to the corner and shift click that up, I then have the same exact ratio, which is the same thing as just making Clint bigger, but in this case I'm making the viewfinder bigger. And that way I just have this here, and I every now and then I can, you know, for example, I could be working along for hours and hours and say, let me just see how everything's coming, turn back on my viewfinder and say, yep, looking pretty good. Or, you know, maybe I need to spend a little more time, that's looking a little bit funny there, so probably need to do something there. Oh, actually it's because I moved something along the way. But anyway, you get the idea. So that's how you make a viewfinder. You just take two rectangles, punch the top one out from the bottom one.